My name is Esther. I'm in my 50s and we live in Scotland. They all started for us quite instantly in around near the end of 2019. My middle was in primary 6, going into 7, I think, and my eldest was in primary 7 and going into high school. And they had leafletly changed the RSHP, which is the sex education. We call it relationship, sexual health and parenting, RSHP. It recently been updated in 2018, and they have a whole new curriculum. And could just within that, that's where my two children learnt about transgender, where they were told that it could be any little boy or girl that they wanted to be, that that it was possible to be born in the mum body, that there was such a thing as being able to change your sex. And one of them was diagnosed with autism, and the other one hadn't been diagnosed yet. We didn't do that until later on. So when it first started, they were curious. We were supportive. We talked about it a lot. When my eldest joined high school, she joined the Pride Club and she started learning more and more about all the different genders and sexualities. And she would come home and we would talk about it at the dinner table. We would talk about it. In the beginning, there was lots of talk, lots of discussions about it. We would try to be supportive. We tried to understand what they were learning and what they were bringing home. So they would come home and say, I'm bisexual. And then the next week they would come home and say, I'm gay. And then there would be lesbian, and then there would be asexual. And we just ran through so many different, whatever they are, genders, ways of expressing yourself, whatever they said, we would try and be understanding. We wouldn't see the way, oh yes, that you are. We wouldn't feel, well, no, you can't do that. That's terrible. We tried. I mean, they were really young. They were only 10, 11 at the time when this first started. So, we were just bombarded with it for a very long time. And then things started to change slightly. They became a bit secretive. They stopped really talking to us. They became a bit argumentative, and they started. So we started staying in the rooms a bit, and this is like just before lockdown. So they started self-harming. So they basically went, right, Angela, stop talking, stopped, I don't know, we just kind of stopped socializing a bit, I guess. And we found out that they were self-harming. So we didn't really know what was going on. We tried to talk to them, and they did sort of shut down at this point. And I found a note on my middle's phone that says, I want to be a boy. So that's when we started the whole trans discussion about, your sex, changing your sex, and that it's not possible to be a boy in our body. We basically tried to steer them in a different direction, because we could see that they were unhappy. We could see there was issues. We contacted, when they started self-harming, that we contacted the school. we were about to get, when the deputy head of the primary school, he was about to start some art therapy stuff with a needle just to try and find out what was going on and to try and see why she's self-harming, what the real issue was. Because we still weren't very sure at that point until we saw this note. We had got involved. We'd asked to get involved with the educational psychologist, and the day before lockdown, we had an appointment with her. She said, "Oh, well, we don't deal with self-harm. That's not something that's not in our remit. We only deal with issues that affect education." And I said, "Well, it's affecting her education. She's miserable. She's harming. She's not really like learning in school. Things have taken a wrong turn here. We need help." No, can't help you. And then it was lockdown. The next day, basically, so everything just stopped. They stopped going to school. They stopped. They stopped any help they could have got. And we got in touch with CAMHS, and they both had mental health risk assessments because things were getting quite difficult by now. They were demanding of us that they wanted different names, they wanted different pronouns, they wanted testosterone, they wanted this, the whole, they wanted to go the whole way basically. So there was a lot of fighting and a lot of arguing, a lot of discussions, a lot of us talking to them about growing up and becoming women and puberty and it's difficult time. It's complicated. You need to bypass things by sometimes. It's not fair to make decisions. All the stuff that but it didn't seem to be. It didn't seem to be like making any difference. They both got these mental health risk assessments. The eldest was given because they knew about her autism. She'd been diagnosed there previously, like 3 years before that, or 4 years, I can't remember. So they knew her. So they offered they offered her an anxiety workshop type counselling. They offered her like workshops on dealing with her autism, stuff like that. But they said that my niddle she wasn't insignificant enough of a risk, even though she was self-harming and, she'd completely, by that point, she'd stopped talking. So whenever we spoke to them, she would never respond. She basically on mute. She wouldn't talk. And my eldest would just argue and fight and ash us and call us transphobes and, basically fight against everything that we were trying to say to them. So that went on for a bit. And then CAMHS offered us family therapy. So we thought, oh, that's going to be really good. They're going to get everyone in. They're going to have us able to talk to each other without, they'll maybe facilitate that and help us build relationships while not agreeing kind of thing, and teach us how to do that and help the kids see that, you can still be part of a family, even if you don't agree, if we don't all agree, we can compromise, we can blah, blah, fucking blah. Because in the end, we got into a really full-on therapeutic relationship with this woman at CAMHS. We went through, Mars and I went through our families, our family histories, our family mental health histories, physical, everything, basically everything about our families and who they were and, if they had a mental health issues or just everything. We basically went pretty deep dive. And at the same time, which we didn't know, she was counselling our eldest. Well, we knew she was counselling her, but we didn't know what was going on there. One day she came and said to us that she was referring us to social services. Just like that. After we we never once got a family together. They never once facilitated that. They never helped us to talk to our children, to have us all in a room together and just be trying to discuss the situation and deal with it therapeutically. That never happened. I don't really know what went on in those sessions. I know that my eldest told her stuff that wasn't true. So she came in this day and said, "We are referring you to social services for emotional abuse." And we were like, "What? I didn't, excuse me, emotional abuse for what? For not, um, for not affirming your child's he/him pronouns." And we made her spell it out. Is that actually? And she said, "Yes, it's unintentional emotional abuse for not affirming pronouns." So we were just gobsmacked. We could not believe that they'd done that without even trying for a reconciliation, without even trying to talk to all of us. So I've no idea what my eldest was telling her. We know now that because of lockdown, they got online, like unfettered 24 access, and there was a lot of this transgender euphoria videos going around on YouTube and TikTok, and all these people saying how wonderful it is to be trans and how amazing they feel having their bits chopped off and how the medicine is just wonderful. And so this is just this is what they were being bombarded with, that we didn't know. We were completely blindsided and had no clue that they were basically being taught an ideology that made no sense. But they were, because of their autism, they had taken it on board and like run with it. They researched it, they watched stuff on it, they'd learnt scripts. So there's like certain things you'll find. A lot of parents will say the same thing, that their children have said X, they've said Y, and it's because they've been taught like a script online of what to say to your parents and how to get around certain issues and how to they're basically being led in what to say and how to pull away from their parents. There's a video that they get to show him in school of a little boy. It's called "How to Be a Girl." It's a cartoony type podcast about this little boy who said he's a girl with a penis. So I mean, there's stuff out there. It's easy stuff. There's so much child orientated material for them to digest easy. So in the minute they were in lockdown, I mean, everything was online. The whole entire world, all the schoolwork, everything. We had no clue that this is happening. It was just they were being bombarded left it basically as truth, as reality. So yeah, it was a lot of clashes, a lot of head banging and fighting, and I think living out here in the middle of nowhere really helped in that they couldn't just easily run off. They couldn't easily just like go over to a friend or something. My eldest, she was going out with a gay boy at the time, so she spent a lot of time over there at his house, and we kind of thought that maybe the parents are a bit like the Glitter family, because they were very obviously super accepting of all of it, encouraged it. So when when that happened, we got such a fright that we just stopped We stopped talking about it at all in the house. We didn't bring it out. We didn't discuss it. We didn't do anything. Actually, before that, I think I forgot to mention that in order to try and help things and to support our kids, we agreed. So the school asked if we wanted to change their names, and they pitched it as an AKA, also known as weenie benign, nothing. It's nothing major. It's just AKA, and they made out that it was like no good deal. And because of the arguing and the fighting and the relentlessness of it all, we compromised and we said to the kids, yeah, okay, we'll do that. So AKA whatever names, and basically the second we did that, we never saw their proper names again. All correspondence, all emails, all letters, all phone calls, all everything was in this AKA new name, and their other names were just gone. Unbeknownst as they also changed their pronouns, which we wouldn't have agreed to, and because we didn't do it at home. But they did it in the school, and we didn't know for at least a year, and it took me a number of years to stop them doing it. But unfortunately, we've recently just found out from a recent parents' evening that my middle, one of the teachers, is still using those pronouns. I was absolutely livid, so angry. I mean, because it takes such hard work to get them to stop doing it. And it was right in the middle of the CAS report that had just been the CAS review, and that had just come out. You know, you're causing there's grave psychological risk and harm to your children if you do this. And so I just laid into them, I thought, you need to stop this. So I thought that had worked. It was kind of pointless for my eldest because she was almost, they think you'd leaving anyway. So she'd spent the past 4 years being called he, him at school. I used to email the school like all the time. When this such started happening during lockdown, I started extensively researching and finding out so much information that I didn't want to know. I basically went to school. I was working in a school. It was 45 minutes away or something, and I was travelling and I was talking, and I got stuck at the traffic jam, and I was talking to Stephanie from Transgender Trend. I got hold of her, and she just told me everything about this gender ideology, the trans movement, about she went right back to the beginning to how it all started, and how it's infiltrated into society everywhere. And she just put the fear of God into me, basically. And this is like right at the beginning when I was finding out, when I first saw the note that my middle had left and they were harming, and it was right at the beginning. So I got to work and basically just broke down, and I had to get sent home because I was just so overwhelmed with what she told me. And I just could not wrap my head around it. It was crazy. People just don't understand how much this is like taking over everything, society, every organisation, school, everywhere. You know, I was the Women's Rights Activist. I was a protester. I did all of that. And I didn't get the extent of it. I never realised any of it. And even back, you know, when I was younger, when the T thought added, I was staring at it in town thinking about it. I just thought, oh, we're being kind to tragic old men who like wearing dresses, you know, like poor them kind of thing. I never in a month of ever known of the Sundays thought that it would suddenly be in my doorstep and my 10 and 11-year-old. I'm like, what? This doesn't make any sense. It was pure nonsense. And trying to talk to the kids about it would always end up in arguments, and trying to talk to them, and they would just come out with crazy pseudoscience nonsense that would just be like, what? That doesn't make sense. It's just not possible. But it's been embedded. It was embedded into the schools. It's embedded everywhere now, and it's embedded in them. for life now. That's their way of thinking, and it's just it beggars belief sometimes, but it's just got this far. It was already everywhere. It was already all over the internet. It was all over. Policies were being changed left, right, and centre. There was the GIR bill was coming up, and when that got kiboshed, the elation, I could not believe. I thought, this is it. People are going to finally understand what the hell's going on, what's happening to our children, what this ideology is doing. But no, it just kept happening. It just kept happening, and it's now been like 7 years. I don't know, and I don't see signs of it abating much. I see fines with the women's rights stuff and the NHA with the Darlington nurses and the changing rooms and the women's sport. They're getting all of that is getting a lot of coverage, big coverage. But children and families that are being destroyed by this, they're still not. Why are they known? People still don't realise. You don't know what's happening in schools. They don't know what this is doing to vulnerable children. To think that they're actually telling children, you've been born in the wrong body. You should have been a boy. You could change your sex. But they're not giving that the full round picture. They're not telling them about the side effects of these drugs, that wonder drugs. They're not showing them the after effects of surgeries and what can happen. They're not telling them, well, actually, if you go down this path, it means that you will never have children, you will be infertile, and your dating pool will be very minimal and difficult because you've changed so much about yourself that you are no longer, I don't know, you're just no longer you. But that's the slant thing. Most of these kids, they don't want to be themselves at the moment. They're stuck in this police system that there's something wrong with them, and they feel that this could be the answer. And what I didn't know, obviously we know now, Liz, that autistic puberty is apparently really confusing. It's really difficult for kids. They don't fully grasp the changes. They don't understand it. They don't like it. Obviously autistic people, they're not they do is change. They like everything to be as it should be. So when somebody turns around and says to them, oh, your weird feelings are because of this, and this is the way to fix it, that like the answer to them, and they've held on to that and that belief. And the problem is that society is helping them. Society think, oh yes, you're a boy, I'll call you he. The doctors, the opticians, counsellors, it's impossible finding therapeutic help for them that wasn't pushing them down this path, that wasn't affirming them, it wasn't saying, actually, you are born in the wrong body, There's something wrong with you. Your mum did give birth to you wrong. I mean, it's really sick, I think, to tell children that sex is assigned by. It's just dangerous. People know, mothers know the sex of their baby, obviously by chromosome 1 shoes. They see it on the screen. They see it in the blood tests. There's so many markers. They know. And to tell children and to have the will believe that you can just choose what sex you are, like some kind of computer game, it's wrong. It's mean, and I just think it's nasty. In primary, I think there might have been one person who was male to female from many years ago. I guess she got captured in the first wave when this all started coming out. Because I do know that around 2015, Stonewall changed their tack. They said, oh, lesbians and gay men, we'd got it all now. We sorted it for them. We're now moving on to the trans. So they completely changed tack and put all the efforts into getting transgender seem as a legitimate identity. And there was lots of underhand inveigling into organisations done by other organisations, getting advice on how to do that, bring onto the radar, and how to avoid being. This just sounds so crazy, but how to avoid being noticed that actually you're trying to change the entire biology of the universe, the entire fit science, and they somehow managed it in 10, 15 years. So we're smack in the middle of all that, where it basically exploded, and everybody was learning about it and knowing about it, and children are being told all this stuff. So obviously they're looking for answers. Kids are looking for an identity. They're looking for something to hold on to. Then when things are difficult, or like an autistic puberty, which is really difficult, people, I don't know. I don't know about boys, but girls growing up into puberty, it's always been difficult. It's always hard. I have a terrible time with my teenage years and my identity and my the way I look, the way I saw myself. If I'd have been around, if I'd have been a teenager, or if that had been happening when I was a teenager, I certainly would have gravitated to that as an answer. And I thought, well, if that's going to make me feel better, if that's going to make my body different from where it is because I hate it. I was caught up in that whole Photoshop media era where everything looked airbrushed and beautiful, and we could never attain such levels of beauty, but we felt pressured, and I certainly did. And for me, it came out as bulimia, which again is I know now due to lack of control and certain other things happening in my life and my childhood that led me to that. But it just feels very similar. I think are very similar. Kids are being bombarded now with negativity. We see it all the time on TV, on the internet, and they get taught about it in school. It was negativity, toxic masculinity, and femininity, and they get it. It's hard for them, and it gets this terrible time. So this came along. I think this just came along at the right, well, not even at the right time, because every generation, so we've had the anorexia, and we've had witch hysteria from centuries. Every generation has something. I don't know that there's ever been anything that's been so detrimental to children, so detrimental to their bodies and their minds, and something that's being placed on them and told that, yeah, that is, you're thinking about yourself is right. You're wrong. You're a terrible person. You're an unhappy body. You need to change everything about you in order to feel that you fit in. I mean, and that's terrible. It's an awful thing to say to kids. Get my head right that we spent so much of our lives telling kids you could be who you want to be. It doesn't matter if you've got a nose the size in the universe, your ears are sticking out. You'll be loved for who you are, as you are, forever. And all of a sudden that's completely reversed, and it's now, well, actually, yeah, you are. You're fat, ugly. There's something wrong with you. You're in the wrong body. You're not right. Take this pill, get rid of your boobs, and it'll be all good. I just can't get over it. Telling children that, and especially vulnerable autistic children who, if you tell them something, they may believe that as a truth. So Scotland is basically telling my children that they're wrong all the time. And it's impossible. It's I'm losing battle, really. We did watchful waiting where, we supported them, but we encouraged them and helped them not fixate on needing medicine, not going on puberty blockers. We avoided that, thank God, just through the grace of God, actually, because the appointments were on some days that we couldn't make it because of our religion and the festivals. So we cancelled them, and then we heard about Tavistock and the terrible stuff that was going on there. So we said, oh, this doesn't sound good. We don't want our kids to go to Sandefjord if Tavistock are having these issues over the same stuff. This doesn't sound safe. There doesn't sound any safeguarding here. One of the statistics that I kept hold of, and it's probably well out of date now, but in 2020 to 21, the statistic was saying that by 2018 there was a 4,000% increase in referrals to the gender clinic. 76% of them were female and 48% of them were autistic. And I mean, that's scary. That if it's scary statistic, my data, and nobody does anything with it. It just hung around for years going, oh, it's terrible. There's been an increase. Yeah. Why? 4,000% increase. Hello, what's going on? Yeah, nobody was joining thoughts until, obviously, Hannah Bont started joining thoughts with Tavistock. And each time, there's a piece of news or a legislation or a policy or a mention or anything about it, I just think this is it. This has to be it. This has to be the moment that people realise, oh shit, we've fucked up royally here. We shouldn't be doing this to kids. It's just not happening. And it's wonderful, all the states in America that are rolling back for minors. And they're now talking about the sports issue. We've had the Supreme Court ruling, but as wonderful as they are, they seem to be moving the pendulum for kids. And people are not really acting on these new rules and policies that are coming out. The Supreme Court staff organises, they're ignoring it. Like, oh, we don't care, it's just a bunch of shaky women, man, not listens to them. And children don't get ridiculous. It's not how to teach children. You're making that up. And no matter how many tidings you feed them, but look at this evidence. Look at this evidence. Look what happened to me. People are still like, no, it's not happening. It's not. And it's infuriating and it's distressing. I feel like living in a dystopian nightmare, especially in Scotland, because it's affirming everywhere. Siblings are affected. People don't think it's happening to children, so they don't even comprehend that siblings can be affected by this. But my youngest, she, when this stuff started happening, and because of the communication difficulties with autism, my youngest, for a very long time, for weeks, she was like screaming, crying, upset, and we couldn't work out why and what was going on. And she told saying, I know her sister. We're not sisters. And we eventually, because they were screaming, fighting all the time about that. And my youngest was getting to, she's like 7 or 8. So she was just learning to find her voice with her sibling. And so she wasn't really able to stand up for herself much, but she knew that something wasn't right. She knew that what was being fed was wrong. So she was like shouting back and trying to like advocate for herself and the sister. And anyway, it turned out, so we had to the family meeting, and it turned out that my eldest, because of the communication difficulties, had been saying to my youngest, "You are not my sister." And what she wasn't saying was, because I now identify the boy, you're not my sister, I am your brother. You are my sister, but I am not your sister. Because she's 7, so she's never going to understand any of that anyway, but she was saying it wrong. The eldest was saying it wrong. So my youngest was being told that she wasn't part of the family, she wasn't a sister. So she was absolutely devastated and crying and screaming matches with her older sister. And when we eventually worked out what was going on, we had to sit them down and we had to do it in a way where we weren't saying that, we weren't affirming and we weren't acknowledging. We just had to keep saying, she's your siblings, you're just not sisters. And even now saying it makes me sad, and that it's just sort of fizzing for a 7-year-old to be told that and have to understand what it meant. I didn't even now think that we'd properly explained it, but she felt better because we said, your siblings, you're still part of the same family, your house, that, we fed all the things you could think of that would help the youngest feel better without directly saying she the boy, or like directly saying your older sibling is your brother, because there's not a chance in hell we would have said that. There's no way. We're going to confuse her even more. I had dreamed to that. So yeah, that was really awful. But in the beginning, when I first started learning what it meant and realizing what was going on, I felt like I was screaming to the rooftops. It was during lockdown. I got myself very unwell. I was already very stressed and distressed about lockdown and the fear of vaccinations, and obviously with the fear that was generated at a time over the whole thing. So I was already a bit unwell with that, and then with this happening with the kids, and I was screaming in the shops. I was trying to get my husband to see. I was sending him stuff all the time, and it took a very long time for him to realize the extent of just how dangerous and scary this ideology was and what it was doing to the kids. But he's feeling on board now. Although we do a watchful way to the approach, but I will send articles. I've sent articles about the dangers of binding. I used to do that in the beginning. I think things over the years, trying just to help them see a different perspective. I've talked to them. I want to do more, whereas my husband would rather, which we have been doing. We've been building relationship, working on the communication, and trying to get our family like back together again, a bit more cohesive, a bit more, we're just trying to get us back to the way we were before. And I don't think we'll ever be, but just a coast loving family. And so he is less keen on like confronting them and sending them stuff. Or I particularly maybe before middle was university, I want her to watch a film and can decide which film would be the best one for her to watch. So I've persuaded my husband that we should do that before she leaves. When things happen over the years, I call them trans oms. So something like obviously that first one seen that note saying I want to be a boy or I want to be a man. But over the years they'd come to me with things and they've told me stuff, or if that night my eldest when she was 16 put herself on the sound food list. And these all cause, and at the time, I call them trans problems because maximum damage and mayhem. Everybody's upset. What's the words is high. Emotions are high, and everybody's in a state because we're just finding out some terrible new thing or have told us. So there's been a lot of them over the years. We get we get mail now in England, Mister, and they're changed names because, and this is my sixth. My eldest did this first, and my middle did this recently. When she's 16, she's now 17. They changed their names. My eldest did it by dude poll, which is not even necessary. She spent money. She didn't have to do that because we don't need to do that in class in Scotland. When my middle went to Justice of Peace, she actually went to Glasgow Sheriff Court or District Court, I don't know, and went in and spoke to the Justice of Peace and got it done, openly. For she now has a driver's license, provisional, her bank, and her name. I don't think she's changed her passport yet. My eldest has changed her passport. She changed her passport without telling us. And then 2 weeks before we were going on our summer holidays, she told us that she had a new passport, and we were like, "Oh fuck, how's that going to work?" So, and we said, "Well, any changes, you going to have to pay for them. It's just a rigmarole and paperwork and phone calls. It's just a hassle, basically." But we got that changed. But yeah, so there's just always something. The latest being bigger on the being referred to the adults good services. How it scares the shit out of me. Because that's a big deal. Thank God there's a big waiting list. And hopefully, I don't know. I can only hope and pray that by the time it comes up to it, they'll have matured a bit. And maybe they'll start to realise. And they'll, I don't know, fools out. When this first started, I couldn't really find any help. It took me a very long time to find support groups because they had to be so underground, because this massive ideology is taken over it, and there's people who are saying this isn't right, and people are losing their jobs, people are kind of losing friends, family. Also, it's just for speaking out. So but it was very underground. It was very difficult to find any groups and to get into them, and you had to do, it was a lot of emailing, and you have to get on, they call it onboarding. You have to call somebody and through Zoom and tell them everything that's going on. It was a very long process, and it was very, very hard to find because I guess we were kind of in their infancy back then as well. And it was mostly, in England. I don't know how I found out about Sue, which is the Scottish Union for Education. They started to do a lot of work trying to find out what was going on at schools, trying to help parents to opt out of the RSHP, and They did a lot. I don't know why it was so difficult. I think partly because I was in the midst of it, and I was so up to high door with it, and I was so like distressed and unwell with it that I don't think I didn't have the wherewithal to kind of find that help. And because it's like underground and kind there, it's not talked about, and they made it even harder. And I did found Bayswater, not just cheap, but it was still difficult to work out how to find the people behind it. Like, there's groups, there's Discord, and I don't use Discord, and I find it very difficult. So I thought that's not for me. That's not going to work. And then I find out about RGT, and they have a WhatsApp group. So I thought much better. So I joined a few of them, and then I forgot that Bayswater last year. But these groups, the Bayswater one has weekly meetings. They were very hard to get into in the beginning century because I didn't have that space to be able to talk, because it was, obviously I had 3 young kids at that point, so that like 12, 11, 7. So it was very hard to find like a quiet space to not be heard, basically, to not be found out. And also the time of a meeting was often at bedtime. So that was difficult. I went to a few of them. They're really helpful. But sometimes it should be really hard being in these groups. You take on other people's when you hear their stories, and it becomes really heavy in your own heart, and really hard to hear. But we're all kind of in the same boat. We're feeling blind, if you like, trying to find out the best way. I've kind of stopped doing it now, but all I do every day is spend time looking for that one nugget of information that might help my kids to understand what they're got themselves into. I kind of stopped doing it now because I don't think there is, though. I mean, there isn't one thing, and I've learned so much over the years, and I know too much now. I never wished to do any of this stuff. There's still, every day, there's still stories coming out. There's still terrible, horrible stories about these trans women who are working with children, and they turn out to be PDS. And, it's horrible reading about it every day, see it, and just think, my kids are so vulnerable. I just don't know what's going to happen to them. I don't know how we're going to get through this. I don't know how they're going to emerge at the end of this. And that's one of the hardest things. It's because we don't know where they're at with all of this. I mean, we know they've put themselves on the list, and because we don't really talk about it anymore, it's difficult to know where they're at. So I'm sort of in a limbo, waiting for either a surgical knife to fall, or for them to teach them ice, realise that this isn't the best route for them, because it's just it's a horrible place to be in, not knowing, unknowing of where we're at, and unknowing of what's going to happen in the future. And my therapist is constantly trying to get me to think about or see what I might be or do in the future if they do take this further. How am I going to deal with it? How am I going to cope with it? And I just can't imagine. And I don't like thinking about it, because I just don't know. And I want to think that I will still be there for them, but I'll support them in whatever their choices. But I don't know how I would do that, knowing that they would destroy themselves. It's too difficult to imagine. And many times I think if it happened, then I don't know that I would be able to, I don't know how I would be able to cope. I don't think I'd be able to have because every time a trans bomb comes up, every time they come up with some new information or they do something, we change their name, every time I fall apart. And it gets harder and harder to pick myself back up and carry on and support them when I know such awful stuff. It's really hard. I don't function well. I can't really talk about it without crying. I don't really talk to people about it. Ego out, and everybody just seems happy and living their lives and talking about it, their kids and what they're doing, and they just got this job, they were doing this, but they want to be happy. My kids go into college, that they're getting into, they want to go to university. These are all things that I should be like failing about, and I should be so praised and happy. That I'm so proud that they're doing it, they're able to, but the fear and the fear and the worry about what will happen if they go to if she goes to university, because universities are so affirming, they're so helpful, they've got so much, so many programs for trans kids that it's just too easy. I would be so happy that she wants to go to university and that she's going to go to university, but I can't because I'm just too scared about what's going to happen. Like I say, it's good. I like giving people with other information that they don't realize of what's going on. I think it's really important that people know. I don't have it so much at the moment, but for many years I have a very strong imperative to inform the world about this nightmare. People need to know. But I feel like I've talked at quite a lot of places. I've been in numbered speeches, but I just don't know what impact they're having. I don't know if it's helping people to see what's going on for family and kids. With Megan Gallagher, Conservatives, we did a talk at Parliament. There was quite a number of families, and we're both from Care. Her story was just, it was awful. What happened to her? And so we sat around this table and told our stories to MSPs that were sitting, with the audience listening. But there was a really important vote on that day, so quite a number of them had to leave, And of course, none of the Greens turned up. None of the Liberals turned out. So, I would love to do more of that, letting them just know exactly how it is for families and children, vulnerable children in the situation. Because it's supposed to help knowing that there's other people in this situation, but that just makes me sadder. It just makes me more upset to know that there's so many of us. Literally thousands and thousands in the UK and God knows how many over the world. I don't really talk about it anymore unless someone brings up first. Nobody wants to be around the distressed sad mum with a tragic story. Nobody wants to be around that person. They don't want to know about it. My eldest, a few years ago, 20, maybe 2021, she took a few paracetamol liquids. She took the liquid. Thank God, though, it didn't do much. My husband and me have both been like suicidal over a time. And my therapist has literally saved my life. I've been wailing on the floor at times because it's kind of a weird, unknown situation, Most therapists don't have experience of it. I don't really do it. I think she's told me, my therapist told me that I'd probably taught her more about it. She knows, I mean, she was already like pro women and that way inclined, but she didn't know anything about the child side. So I've like fully educated her. She goes back to how groups or to how organisations can take that knowledge, which that's quite good to know. Or it's having that time in my kids' life when they're meant to be separating. They're meant to be becoming more independent from me, and this is just like push them further. Not to be independent, but it's pushed them further away from us. They get advice and information off the internet on how to estranged themselves from work, how to not talk to it, or how to argue with us, or we get told all this stuff on how to deal with it, and none of it is family friendly. None of it is about keeping the family unit together. It's all about creating society and brushing up a family unit. We've lost so much of their childhood to this. We've lost so much of our family life to it. And if he doesn't show any signs of ending, I can't see an end. Because they might medicalise, and it's always hanging over us. I used to have visions that I would stand outside the school with a billboard, or like I would stand with a sign, and I never did that party because I think my kids would properly do so, and they would be mortified. So it's all very hidden what I'm doing. I have to hide my emotions and my feelings as well quite a lot. You have to hold back, not say things. There's a lot of convoluted linguistic games that you have to play. So you're not using names and you're not using pronouns. It gets very confusing. We use like pet names, and we make words up, and also we're not saying a he or a him or a she or a her. It's just it just sounds so ludicrous. I tried in the beginning. I used their chosen names a wee bit. I tried to do it. I found it was very useful when they were being really belligerent and not listening and not responding. It was very helpful that way, and I thought, well, I'm only using it for my benefit, for my advantage, and it just didn't feel right, and I eventually stopped taking it, rolled back, and we just call them other names now. Husband never kissed the name. I tried in the beginning, because they're so wee and young, and they just are so angushed, and you wanna help them without knowing exactly what's going on and whether that's a beneficial thing to do. To call them by a different name or cat instincts, there's no to it. I think what I would, what I'd want to say and what I probably shouldn't do, but what would be really great is if you went, no, my lovely, that's not possible. You can't become a boy. You can't become a girl. You were born the way. This is who you are. You're beautiful. You're wonderful. You know, cut it dead in the beginning. But I don't even know if that would work, if even possible nowadays, because it's so prevalent, but permeates into everything. So I don't even know whether a harsh no right at the start it might help. I just think you need to know if your kid is vulnerable, if they have autism, like if they've had like anything terrible happen to them in the past, or if they're going through a terrible time with, divorce or abuse or anything like that. All these vulnerable children are susceptible to being told that their life will be so much better if they just. I think it's important to keep the lines of communication open with your kids. Keep talking to them. Try and get them out off their phones. If you're able to cut social media, get it off their phones. It's the devil. Get them out in nature. Get them do stuff with their bodies, moving. Do stuff with the family together. Try and get that cohesiveness back into your family. Get the love back in. If it's talking about it is creating fights and arguments, stop helping me out for a bit. Focus on something else. Just do anything else but you can. I don't know how bad CAMHS are now, but my fear and my experience would say to the way from CAMHS. I think CAMHS now only take kids if there's if they're very serious mental health issues. Or what else? They won't let them go to Pride Club. If you can, keep them away from that. One of the main difficulties that we had, I think, came from being quite liberal and supportive. Unfortunately, we believed LGBT it's about sexuality, it's about identity, it's about who you love, and it's not. And we were supportive of that. We weren't against any of that. So when they first started talking about it, we were like, oh, okay, so you think you might be bisexual, you think you might be gay, and sometimes hallucinatory I should have been. I don't know that I could have been, but I could have been a hard line. I know we're not having any of that in this house, but I did never been that bad because we were never like that. As parents, we were always open and supportive and, trying to help and understand. At the time, I guess, we didn't realise the T had got Pat phone and it's completely different. It's not about sexuality. It's about how you feel yourself and not loving yourself the way you are, which goes against everything you are a teacher kids. There's so many. I either wish I'd done different, like maybe sat them down and told them more, but I think that might have pushed them away though, because it would have been too much for them. It did get a bit much for them. In the beginning, I used to send them things and I'd talk about it a lot, and I'd be very vocal about all the women's protests and women's rights and stuff. It just made them more unhappy. So I kind of had to curtail it a bit. Yeah, there's a lot of holding back, not saying, and just hope, around hope that they will mature. I do need to start strengthening myself up, because worst case scenario, I may do medicalize. You're asking what parents can do. One thing I think is very important is to make sure you know what your kids are doing on their phone. We, in the beginning, I really wanted to get hold of their phones to find out what was going on, but my husband wasn't keen because he didn't want to invade their privacy, he didn't want to make a big deal out of it, So he didn't want an argument and a fight. And so we didn't do it. And then when my middle was about 14, I finally managed to get on her phone. And it was horrific. She had, I don't know how many Google accounts. She had lots of different accounts. She had lots of different Twitter accounts and Discords. The Twitter one, she had got herself onto pro-anorexia stuff. If you type in hashtag TWTED or hashtag 988, they bring up posts with children with anorexia and eating disorders and pictures of them like standing sideways, bored thin, or lying flat, being like really, really thin. And it was also a Twitter. I think that TWT on the 988 was self-harming. So they would be getting advice on how to self-harm. There would be pictures of people's cuts and videos of people doing it. And there'd be, they'd be encouraging to get this thing called beans, which is when you cut just right in a certain way, you get like bubbles forming and they're called beans. So there was a lot of that going on and it was just horrific. One of the worst things that we found was that she had joined this messaging service called Kik. The only way I can describe it is a bit like AOL, where they have different rooms. But it's a messenger service. It's a bit like WhatsApp, but it's called Kik. And they have all these different rooms, that she was in this room about, what was it called? Something like weed. Something just weed, basically. And it was like, it was like a fun group with about weed, funny jokes, mean to whoever. But actually, it was a sugar daddy fight for sending photographs, and these men would message and say, send me this and I'll give you money. And so she had just started it, and she was asking whether they would take Amazon vouchers or if they would put it onto her Amazon card, or because she was only 14, so she didn't have access to getting money online. And she didn't realise how like dangerous and terrible this was. She brushed it off and would have just got a picture off the internet, would have downloaded something off the net, and she didn't understand that, once you get talking to these people, that it can turn into more and you can get coerced. She had no idea about the dangers that she had been in during that. It was just horrific. So, yeah, if you can get a hold of your kids' phones, see what they're doing, stop them being on Twitter, stop them being in all these sites. Discord is really bad now. And Reddit. Oh, if you can get into your internet provider site, you can put in keywords for that. They don't, you can't look them up, so if the kids try to look something up, like a word chant with it, you won't be able to. That's a good thing to do. We also have Google Family, I think it's called, Family Lake. And so we have access to phones now, they're on that, and they have to ask for permission, could audit sites and apps as well. And we could block through that one as well. Then my middle now, she's 17, so almost 18, so we don't have as much tight control over as we used to. And I wish to God we'd done it in the beginning. I wish God would done it sooner, got older her phone sooner, and the computers to see what was going on. I should be checking their computers. I haven't done it for a while. And there was a time when they were both at home, the two killed ones, when they were so horribly bad, that I would have to like weekly go into their rooms and remove implements and make it like safer for them. That's quite traumatizing to do that every week. They'd have like boxes with their badges and their clasters and things, and I would find these really skanky blades that we got off the internet, off Amazon. Really awful looking stuff. And they would also buy blades and get them delivered, just like wheel blades. And they're not supposed to. They're supposed to get questioned at the door to check that you're over 18, but most truth is told. They're also getting binders delivered. And we're getting free binders from websites. That was all happening back then too. They were get it delivered to their friends' houses if we caught it here. With mine binder tape, and I'd have to be confiscating it. Couldn't take all through their mail all the time to check. There was no blades, no cape stuff, no pills. I am most angry with the school, the government, society, everybody that firms. All of them. Hate them all. I'm angry with all of them. But mostly the way the RSHP came in like a wrecking ball. Run and the advice they got from dodgy doctors and just the whole way it came in. But one of the hard things is your own family, like my brothers or my sister or cousins and that using their other name or using a pronoun. Not really. That's really upsetting. It's really difficult. If you can get your family on board to not affirming, that can really help. I think if you just don't give it any fuel.
You've been listening to Unsilenced Project.